عذرا بيروت.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yuna Naufal, and these are today's top stories. Prime Minister Tamam Salam calls for a cabinet session as the country faces a number of pressing issues, including the waste management crisis, the wages of public sector employees, and other economic concerns. French authorities continue to question a man who carried out an attack on board a high-speed train traveling from Amsterdam to Paris. And Iran's defense ministry unveils a new-to-surface solid-fuel missile named Fateh 313, which say could strike targets with accuracy within a range of 500 kilometers. Good afternoon to all our viewers. Prime Minister Tamam Salam is expected to call for a cabinet session as the country faces a number of pressing issues. A Jamhuriya newspaper said that his call will be accompanied with the agenda of the session, which will likely be held on Thursday. The agenda will include the waste disposal crisis, the wages of public sector employees, and other economic concerns. They explained that the Premier resorted to the vote of the simple majority of ministers in making the call for Cabinet to convene. In addition, he coordinated with the Cabinet General Secretariat and the General Directorate of the Presidency to publish in the official Gazette next week a number of decrees. Political disputes have blocked the government from making any major decisions, including agreeing on alternative ways of dealing with the garbage crisis, which erupted when the Naameh landfill south of Beirut was closed on July 17th. A Tripoli activist said it has discovered 3 new illegal waste sites despite intensive night guarding to prevent garbage trucks from entering the northern city. The so-called Emergency Committee to Save the City of Tripoli said in a statement that they will intensify the monitoring process and safeguard the city around the clock. The group announced 2 days ago that its volunteers began monitoring for illegal dumping after a spate of recent incidents. The volunteers watch the entrances of the city to prevent any garbage trucks from entering and unloading their waste. The government has been wrestling with a mounting garbage crisis since July 17th when the landfill Naameh was forced to close. Human Rights Watch is calling for an investigation into the use of force by police to break up a protest earlier this week in downtown Beirut. Authorities should immediately open an impartial investigation to ensure accountability for any excessive use of force and refrain from repeated violence against demonstrators. This is what HRW said in its statement, adding that dozens of supporters of the UREEK collective were attacked by baton-wielding riot police during a protest on Wednesday against the government's failure to resolve the waste crisis. Violence erupted when the protesters began throwing objects at police after they detained one of their comrades who had crossed the barbed wire near the Grand Sarai. Later, police fired water cannon at the protesters who tried to tear down the barrier. After refusing orders, the protesters dispersed and police charged the protesters and struck them with their baton. The Future Movement's dialogue with Hezbollah is an attempt to hold the group accountable and not provide political cover for its actions, according to Future MP Ahmed Fatfat. He said this while accusing the group of protecting what he called criminals. The dialogue table is not a cover for Hezbollah, but rather a trial for them, Fatfat said to Ashad Al-Awsat radio station. The MP, known for his hardline anti-Hezbollah views, said the dialogue was not touching on large issues such as Hezbollah arms, its intervention in Syria, or its stance toward the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. Representatives from the two parties have been meeting regularly in dialogue sessions sponsored and hosted by Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri since December. Fatfat said Hezbollah tried to silence the movement by demanding that the dialogue be accompanied by a media truce. French authorities continue to question a man who carried out an attack on board a high-speed train traveling from Amsterdam to Paris last evening. It is still unclear whether there was a political motive to the actions of the man, identified by police as a 26-year-old Moroccan. The attacker was subdued by 3 Americans traveling on board the train and was detained at Arras in northern France after the train was diverted there. One of the Americans, Air Force serviceman Spencer Stone, remained hospitalized after being stabbed, though his injury has not been life-threatening. Another passenger was wounded by a handgun in Friday night's attack, according to police union official. Dozens of people, mostly civilians, have been killed in fighting and airstrikes by a Saudi-led coalition in Yemen's third city of Taiz, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. Yemen spokeswoman Rima Kamal said the Friday violence between Iran-backed rebels and pro-government forces had killed 80 people by late evening, adding that it was unknown if people in the city were dead or alive under the rubble. The Doctors Without Borders aid group said that 65 civilians had been killed and several wounded in coalition bombing runs in Taiz's Salah neighborhood. The rebel-controlled Saba news agency said the raids had killed 63 civilians and wounded 50. Backed by Saudi-led airstrikes and support from a mainly Arab military coalition, loyalists in Yemen have made sweeping recent advances in the south against rebel fighters. Coming up next, Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump calls Obama a divider. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news here on Future Television. Iran's defense ministry unveiled a new surface-to-surface solid fuel missile named Fateh 313, which it said could strike targets with pinpoint accuracy within a range of 500 kilometers. President Hassan Rouhani said at the unveiling ceremony on Iran's Defense Industry Day that the country's military might was a precondition for peace and effective diplomacy and is only to be used to safeguard territories and interests. Rouhani said on at the ceremony broadcast on state television. The ministry said that the Fateh 313 has already been successfully tested and that mass production would start soon. The unveiling ceremony comes little more than a month after Iran and world powers reached a deal that requires Tehran to abide by new limits on its nuclear program in return for Western governments seizing economic sanctions. According to the deal, any transfer to Iran of ballistic missile technology during the next 8 years will be subject to the approval of the United Nations Security Council, and the United States has promised to veto any such requests. Egypt's foreign minister Sameh Shoukry met the UN's envoy for Libya, Bernardino Leon, in Cairo, where the two discussed the unrest in the North African country. Libya has spiraled into chaos since the NATO-backed uprising that ended Muammar Gaddafi's 4-decade reign, with much of the country controlled by rival militias and Islamic extremists. ISIS has exploited the chaos, setting several local affiliates and seizing Gaddafi's hometown. North and South Korea sat down to urgent top-level talks seeking some way out of an escalating crisis that has pushed both their militaries to the brink of an armed conflict. The talks in the border truce village of Panmunjom began shortly after the expiration of a North Korean deadline for Seoul to halt loudspeaker propaganda broadcasts across the border or face military action. Despite skepticism that Pyongyang would follow through on its threat, the ultimatum raised border tensions to their highest level for years, with the North repositioning artillery units and South Korean and U.S. fighter jets flying simulated bombing runs. The dialogue in Panmunjom, where the Korean War ceasefire was signed, offers a chance for both sides to step back, although analysts say finding a workable compromise would be difficult. Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump at an election rally in Alabama took President Obama to task for ongoing racial tensions, calling him a divider who has failed to unite the country. Trump, who is leading his nearest Republican rivals by a large margin and gaining ground on Democrat Hillary Clinton, according to most polls, addressed a raucous crowd in Mobile, Alabama on Friday evening. To handle increased demand for tickets, the mobile rally was moved to a football stadium with seating for more than 40,000. This outspoken real estate mogul blamed Obama for rising racial tensions after the spate of shootings of black civilians by police.
And I actually thought that President Obama, the one thing, he was inexperienced, he never produced a job, lots of other things. But I actually thought that he would be a really great cheerleader for the country when he was elected. I thought that he would. And he's really turned out to be a great divider as opposed to a great unifier. Really has. And you look at Baltimore, you look at Ferguson, you look at St. Louis last night, over the last week. You look at all the things that are happening. We're sitting on powder kegs. There's no spirit. There's no jobs. There's no anything. 7.5% of all of the births in this country are illegal immigrants, okay? We can't afford it. And they're supposed to stay. Now, I turned out to be right, the 14th Amendment. You know, I had these guys on television, oh, you can't change the 14th Amendment. It'll take so long. On that, I agree. But you know what? An act of Congress. The 14th Amendment, I was right on it. You can do something with it, and you can do something fast. You can do something fast. So China is dumping tremendous amounts of steel into our country. The government is subsidizing it. It's almost like they want us to just die. And they have no respect for us. And again, like Saudi Arabia, like Japan, I get along with them great. You know, the largest bank in the world is in one of my buildings. They pay me rent. They buy apartments, they spend so much money. Am I going to dislike them? I love them. The problem is, and I say it all the time, their leaders are really smart. They're really cunning. They're really sharp. And we have dummies, right? We have dummies. We have dummies. Thank you very much.
Rapper Dr. Dre has reportedly issued an apology to the women he has hurt amid allegations that he had previously abused them. The New York Times now published a story on Friday based on what they say is a written statement issued by Dre. According to the paper, the statement reads, quote, 25 years ago, I was a young man drinking too much and in over my head with no real structure in my life. However, none of this is an excuse for what I did. I've been married for 19 years and every day I'm working to be a better man for my family, seeking guidance along the way. I'm doing everything I can so I never resemble that man again. I apologize to the woman I have hurt. I did not and know that it had forever impacted all of our lives. End quote. The allegations have been brought to the forefront with the release of Straight Outta Compton, the film which follows the founding of Dre's 1980 hip-hop group, NWA. In more cheerful news, a Florida couple married for 60 years now is still enjoying a tradition from their wedding day. Every anniversary, they take a bite from the top layer of their wedding cake, which they keep stored in a coffee tin in a closet above their refrigerator. Anne and Ken Fredericks say they pour brandy over the dark fruit cake to moisten it and break off a piece. Anne Fredericks told Florida Today that her children are appalled, but she says it's actually quite tasty with the brandy and has never made them sick. The couple got married in Yak, New York in 1955, and Anne's grandmother made the cake. The 3-layer cake was made a couple of months before the wedding so it would settle. A local bakery then covered it in frosting before the wedding. Some habits never die. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Prime Minister Tamam Salam calls for a cabinet session as the country faces a number of pressing issues, including the waste management crisis, the wages of public sector employees, and other economic concerns. French authorities continue to question a man who carried out an attack on board a high-speed train traveling from Amsterdam to Paris. And Iran's defense ministry unveils a new surface-to-surface solid fuel missile named Fateh 313, which it said could strike targets with pinpoint accuracy within a range of 500 kilometers. Those are your headlines live on Future Television. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.